On today's episode, we are joined by Jonathan from the John 3:15 podcast to talk about how libertarians want to destroy families since they're the last vestiges of communism. See how no religions are mutually exclusive. Hear a take from Bill Kristol on spreading deadly false information, and watch Ben Shapiro and Vaush try to out-cringe each other. This is Cringe Posts. Hello, friends. Welcome to this episode of the Cringe Posts podcast, the show where we take those online takes that you see in your feed that just make you shudder and cringe. We talk about them, we debunk the wrong assumptions made in them, and we hopefully have a laugh along the way. My name is Donald. I'm here with my co-host Britt, and today we are joined by our special guest Jonathan from the John 3:15 podcast, which I will let him shout out. Just want to really quickly remind everyone to like and comment and share if you are able to. It really helps us grow, and we've been seeing great growth, so we appreciate that interaction. And then lastly, want to remind you that if you are listening to this and you want to catch all these posts visually after the fact, we do have a companion to that. If you go to cringepost.com after the fact, or as you're listening, you can watch along if you are not watching this through YouTube or Odyssey. That being said, Jonathan, go ahead and shout out anything you want, maybe your podcast, but hey, it's your time. You can shout out what you want.
For sure. Thanks, Donald. And thanks, Britt, for having me on the podcast. I've been listening for a while now. Actually, it was Jeremy, who's my co-host on the John 3:15 podcast, who I believe you've had on not that long ago. It was a number of episodes ago. But yeah, I've been watching ever since. Love your guys' stuff. But yeah, as you were saying, Donald, I'm from the John 3:15 podcast. It's the show where we break open the mysteries of the most popular and misunderstood Bible verses. Sorry, that's my intro pitch right there. But yeah, if you're interested about the Bible, or more likely, if you're interested about how people really go wrong with the Bible, we have the podcast for you.
It's a good one, folks.
Yeah.
If you're listening, I've listened to it quite a bit, and I'm a big fan.
I was gonna say, for those of you who are maybe their interest is piqued, it might be even more piqued as we are. They are, we nothing. They are in a series on the relation of the Bible to authority and governments, and the most recent episode was on taxation. Just finished that on my commute to work on Monday. So it's good stuff. You should check it out. It's been a blast. We had Jeremy on, and now we're having Jonathan on. But because Jonathan is joining us, that means we get to put him on blast before we put other people on blast. So today, we are looking at the self-cringe from Jonathan. This one comes from March of 2009, and Jonathan posts, Jonathan will pay some big money, $, to comment on one of his, I see, will pay someone, I see, not some, yeah, okay, we'll pay someone.
Oh yeah, the cringe starts already.
Yeah, there's a separated someone there. Will pay someone big money to comment on one of his new photos. Please, snifle. I think, again, it's supposed to be sniffle, but there's only one F in each. So, wow, this one is bad, Jonathan. What do you remember the context at all?
Yeah, what was the photo?
Yeah, well, so I actually do remember the context I was looking through. I had just spent 40 minutes, I had found the built-in webcam software on my computer, yes. And it had a bunch of filters and stuff on it of you could do all of these effects, and so I had posted 6 or 7 of these with what I thought were incredibly clever titles, and much to my chagrin, I realized that literally nobody cared.
I think what adds insult to injury for that is that there's no interactions with this post either. No, there's no likes or comments on the please like my other posts.
You're shouting into the void.
Yes, it's true. I think the thing that's worse, the worst part about this, and from my perspective, is it's just so deeply pathetic. I'm literally begging people of please do something with what I've posted, but it's also self-aware that it's pathetic because I've put the snifles or sniffles at the end of the post here, and yeah. It's I know it's pathetic and I'm doing it anyway.
Well, something that Britt and I have commented on our more sort of cringe personal characteristic type self cringes is that the advantage is that we've hopefully sort of grown out of that, or at least matured a little bit and moved away. And there are some people who actually don't move away from that type of pathetic behavior, and they know it's pathetic. I think a lot of people like that tend to run for office, in fact. So, but that being said, we will move to our first cringe post of the episode. And this one reads, if you think about it, the nuclear family is the last vestige of primitive communism, where everyone, at least ostensibly, contributes according to ability and takes according to need. That's why, naturally, the libertarians want to destroy it. This is one of those takes where you start reading it and you're like, okay, I see where you're going. And then the last half comes, you're like, what? Where did that come from? I mean, initially, the thing that strikes me is like, one, families are not really communist in any sense of the word, in that resources are not provided for equally, right? Like responsibility and resource are not given according to ability and need so much as responsibility is given, and then you can earn that, right? Like in most functioning families, kids start doing chores when they're responsible enough, and then they get rewarded for that. But it's not like this division of labor that is equally applied, and so the kid's doing just as much as the adult. It is based on according to need, but it's entirely made through the purview of the parents and their judgment, who have authority, rightfully by biological, rights and God-given rights, in my opinion here. So it's just such a weird thing to then say that because the family unit works, this then gets applied to everyone in society. I mean, I just don't see communism equating family structures that well when you try to expand it. It doesn't equate to me. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think the thing that's just so painful about this is it's presenting this idea of like primitive communism, but the whole notion of the family is that it's a hierarchical structure, that like you have parents in charge, and there's no sense of equality between parents and children. Right. in a nuclear family. It's like the parents are definitely the ones who are in charge, and they sort of like, this is how it rolls. So like in what sense is this like there's no like radical egalitarianism in families.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite kind of critiques of this, because you see this take a lot, like if you were to steel man it and just grant the premise, right, that like a family is a good representation of communism. It's not, but let's just grant it that it is. It's like, yeah, communism works great for usually about 10 people. And even when scaled to 300 million people, it usually only works good for about 10 people at the top of that, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just like you were saying, Jonathan, like you can't avoid hierarchies, right, in any society. And so in communism, or even in an unhealthy family, right, like you're going to have people that are in charge, and maybe they're benevolent, and maybe it scales okay within the family unit because it's like, hey, parents have a need within themselves to be responsible for their children and make sure everyone is provided for and such. But you can't have someone at the top of a 300 million person hierarchy making sure everyone is provided for equally or well, even if they were benevolent. And usually the people that reach the top of a 300 million person hierarchy are usually not very benevolent.
I also just laugh and that's why libertarians want to destroy it, which to me I genuinely don't know. You would think that the way this person is talking, that they were a leftist based on sort of the pro-communism family, and then critiquing libertarians for wanting to destroy family culture. That sounds like a Republican or a conservative saying like, oh, it's just those libertarians wanting to destroy the family, legalize weed, and all that kind of thing. And so I was baffled by that, because I'm like, I don't know where this person's coming from. It's true. I mean, I have to grant them, at the very least, they're not falling into a totally stereotypical archetype of political view. But I think this is maybe the view of someone who either has been exposed to too many cringy libertine types, who are like sort of adolescent libertarians who are just like, like their rallying cry is legalize sex work, right? And it's like, okay, I mean, we can debate the merits of like criminalizing something like that, But why should that be your championing cry when we're literally bombing people in the Middle East for no reason except that, they want to sell arms to the government and that kind of, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many better ways to go about this. So that you either strike there, or you're someone who's just fundamentally misunderstanding the idea of that libertarians want, which is self-autonomy and self-responsibility, which through a family structure is taught. And as a parent, your self-responsibility includes that of your children. And so it flows very naturally together.
Yeah, and it's like as if libertarians are the ones who are like leading the charge against like rooting out communism. It's like, what libertarians are you talking about?
I wish. But yeah, I don't know. Britt, did you have any thoughts on that particular aspect of it?
Yeah, you guys nailed it.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just a kind of a funny take to me.
It's a weird one too.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to have a conversation with this person, frankly. Okay, our next post is a quote, actually, so we do out because this person's somewhat notable, and it reads, "God is not upset that Gandhi was not a Christian because God is not a Christian. All of God's children and their different faiths help us to realize the immensity of God." Desmond Tutu. All of God's children and their different faiths help us realize the immensity of God. Well, yeah, it does help me realize the immensity of his wrath that will come down on people who deny Christ. I guess in an aspect he's not wrong.
Yeah, it's the with this one it's the classical sort of trying to say that it's like, oh, all religions kind of have things that are sort of right, and this sort of vague spiritualism that's kind of popular these days, and the thing that's just so like cringy about this is that Desmond Tutu is making this very strong truth claim about like the nature of reality and the nature of God, namely that God has, these different facets that people have access to in their various faiths, despite the fact that, the people in the faiths that he's talking about generally will like totally deny the claim that he's making here. Like, the vast majority of like Orthodox Christians would deny that people from other faiths are like seeing facets of God's character the way that Desmond Tutu means this. And similarly, it's like if you asked like a conservative Muslim or someone like this, they similarly would like absolutely reject this claim. And so Desmond, he's trying to kind of come out all like high and mighty and like, oh, look how tolerant and accepting I am, and this like open-mindedness that I have about it, when really he's just like making this claim and trying to kind of piggyback off of other people's faiths without, I don't know, actually validating what those people like. He's basically he's appropriating other people's religions to kind of try to like make his claim. I mean, that's what he's doing.
I don't really know Desmond Tutu that well, but like just quick Google search, like he's an Anglican like theologian.
I'm sorry,
right?
guys. I gotta own that.
This one's all your fault, Don.
I know.
So I'm assuming there's at least some appeal, not appeal, but he recognizes the Bible as an authority. Maybe not anymore. Apparently, off of this, and this just reminds me of a conversation I had with a work buddy of mine. And we were talking, and we became pretty good friends. And he was asking me about what I believe and everything. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. And then I asked him, I was like, so what do you believe? And I didn't know this at the time, but it always struck me as really funny because he answered, he's like, well, I believe whatever you believe, is what he said. And then as we got into more of what I believed, right? Because I believe in the Bible, and I believe the Christian faith, and Jesus Christ clearly states in that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him, which is an exclusion, based religion, right? Like there's only one way to come to know the Father in that religion. It quickly became apparent that this other guy did not believe what I believe. And, it was his whole effort, right? He wanted to be like, well, I can just relate to everyone, and I believe in... And these people that are moral relativists, they almost understand the need to have an authority above the authority, right? Where they believe like, hey, like, yeah, like there is the king, but the king is subservient to some other value above that. But they've weirdly placed a religious emphasis, or they've weirdly like even separated that even further. So like, oh, like all religions like are subservient to this other value, and it's like, well, at some point you come to the end value, and you have to acknowledge that value has rules and guidelines, and especially if you have religions that are saying that, you know, like Christianity or other religions, they're like, hey, there is one way to know God, right? There's one way to live right or correct, and you can't have both be true, right? It's the unstoppable force meets the immovable object in that case, and one has to give. And that's what's always so funny to me about it. It's like you can't make everyone happy, dude. Like you kind of got to choose, and everyone will choose at some point.
To me, it strikes me as like he is trying to relate all these religions in the way that someone might say. So let's say you have two people disagreeing, like, I think candy is junk food, it's unhealthy, and it's really bad for you. And someone else is like, well, I think candy's great because it can be a stress reliever, it tastes good, and it can bring joy. And he's viewing, you know, sort of this idea of faiths as that conversation, where he's like, no, you can see both sides. There's different aspects that are both true in both cases. And that's kind of the limit of a lot of people who are of this kind of persuasion. I some of my family kind of feels that way, and that's about as far as they want to go. But then you come to conversations that can't, and I would argue that most religions that are more than just sort of a happy clappy Sunday social club would feel, they come to a point that's more like a conversation of, this mushroom is poisonous and will kill you if you eat it. No, this mushroom will get you into the gates of heaven.
We're going to find out one way or the other.
Right. And it's like, this will bring you ecstasy and joy. No, this will kill you. And it's like, you can't be like, I see both sides of the argument here. And really, they're both true. Like, no, there is that exclusionary thing that you're talking about, Brett. And this, if you've seen I haven't watched all of it, but I've watched a good deal of the Jordan Peterson appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, the most recent one. Jordan Peterson talks about this with the Bible. I mean, like, this dude is just on the gates of heaven right now. Like, he's so close. But he's talking about how the Bible is not true. It's like the foundation of truth. And like, in order for truths to exist, you need something fundamental like this to be true for other truths to stack on. And that's so to me, it's like, it's really unfortunate when a, you know, at least non-declared Christian, who's, you know, someone not actively declaring faith in Christianity, is so much more clear and right on the fundamental aspects of even the ideas of truth. Even if you don't believe in the Christian faith, right? You understanding the idea that a faith that is exclusionary in nature like that has to be the basis and foundation of the idea of truth is so much more clear-headed and valuable than someone who is, at least professes to be a bishop in the Anglican faith, just saying sort of this mishmash of all religions are equally true or show different aspects of truth, which is just unfortunately not the case, I guess. Unless anyone else has more thoughts on this, we can move on.
I have one more on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, I found what you were saying about Jordan Peterson really interesting because, you know, and I think it was Aquinas. I might be wrong on that, and Jonathan, you can correct me because you probably know better than me. But, you know, talked about like, hey, like there's kind of two aspects of God's word. Like there's his written word, and then there's the word that he has revealed through nature, like just the natural laws of things. And the Bible talks a little bit about that. Like people can see him within nature. Like the world is ordered in such a way that it makes sense. And I think what Jordan Peterson does a really good job of is he marries that, right? Like he sees that there's the truth within the Bible, and there's some of these really absurd stories, but they line up with the organized reality that we encounter day in and day out. And I think that's what's really powerful about the Bible. And whether you are, you know, a really well-trained theologian or you're the common layman that's just a little bit observant, that's why the Bible is so powerful, right? Is because it matches up with the experience that you have day to day within your relationships, within, you know, the life that you live, with these absurd stories, right? That make little to no sense, you know, if they were just read literally. And that some of them are to be read literally, but you know what I'm saying? Like they're crazy, but they line up with what we experience in our day-to-day lives. And I think, like you're saying, for Jordan Peterson to like come to that conclusion in such a, like from a standpoint, I would say he is a secular, you know, psychologist. It's like, dude, come on, Desmond, like get your act together. This is embarrassing, man. I don't think he should even have the title theologian. You know, it's really embarrassing.
Yeah, Desmond did great work in anti-apartheid stuff, but like once you start, you know, and the problem is that so much social justice type stuff gets mixed into good ideas and good causes, and then it bleeds into the Bible, and you're mixing your politics in there, and
Sure.
it's just. it becomes sticky, you know. But if you listen to the John 3:15 podcast, you would learn that the Bible absolutely prescribes a political solution to taxes in verse and detail and chapter. It prescribes the one solution. So you'll have to listen to hear what that one secret is.
It's true. It's true. There's the plug right there. If you want to know the truth about taxation, is it theft? Is it not theft? How can it be done? How should it not be done? You should listen to our episode, most recent.
Bible definitively answers, not clickbait. You won't believe episode... What was that episode? I don't remember.
Episode 30.
30, yeah. Minute 50 will shock you. Okay, moving on to our next cringe post here. We have... Okay, so this one's just from this morning. So this one is from NBC New York. #breaking. Tom Brady, who lost 2 Super Bowls to the Giants during his legendary 22-year NFL career, retires. See his full message here. Yes, that of course is how everyone remembers Tom Brady, notable football quarterback who lost 2 times to the Giants in the Super Bowl. Not at all anything about his 7 years winning the Super Bowl or his, lifetime records that he sets. Here's the thing. I don't watch sports. I am not a sports guy. I know that Tom Brady is legendary. He's like the GOAT of football. And so I saw this and I was like, oh my goodness. Here are some other headlines maybe that NBC New York might want to consider for historic events. Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison, has died. Adolf Hitler, rejected from art school, takes his own life. Or maybe a future one, Donald Trump, who bankrupted 6 businesses, dies. And let's be real, they probably will take this last one because that's just the kind of people journalists are. The one thing I will say before I shut up here is that I was talking to my friend from New York and he lost it because he's like, it is true that this is how journalists behave, but it's also just New Yorkers because New Yorkers hate Tom Brady, apparently. But to me, this is just kind of a lighthearted demonstration of the idea that journalism is often factual but not truthful. I don't know if anyone else had thought it was just as funny as I did. We literally can move on because it's not a super deep one, but I just thought this was just so cringy to see just like the blatant, I don't know, like this incredible dude who failed in these ways is retiring. It's like, what?
Yeah, I think because like obviously we are knee deep in cringe twice a week for the past year, and it makes me think a lot about like why does a post make me feel cringy, or secondhand embarrassment or things like that. And I kind of like have distilled it down to it's like when the person who is doing it is obviously trying to like display some sort of falsehood or say something that's not true or something that clearly has an agenda. And it's just so obvious that they're trying to make you think one way or the other. And like it's so clear, right? It's like, dude, like, yeah, I don't think anyone remembers that. I didn't know he lost 2 Super Bowls to the Giants. I did know that he won 7, and I'm not a big football guy or anything like that. But from my understanding, he's like literally by far, and I think universally recognized as the greatest football quarterback of all time. And it's just, I think that's why so many people kind of like dislike the press, right? Because it's like, it's obvious, right? It's become so clear they have an agenda and that they're going to do whatever they can to manipulate you into, viewing their agenda in the way that they want you to. And yeah, I love this because this is kind of like a non-political thing. And there is some political stuff about Tom Brady, right? There's a reason for a lot of these people to not like him, maybe rightfully or wrongfully so. I don't really know because I don't follow him at all. But yeah, it was a great example. Jonathan and I, when we both saw it, had to, because we don't really know football, we had to look for a second to understand why is this cringy? And I was like, oh, okay. Like, who cares that he lost 2 Super Bowls?
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly the thing, is that it's all about the way that the media frames the stories that they're actually, reporting on. And it's sneaky that you slip in this a positive statement kind of in the middle of here, where it's like, who lost 2 Super Bowls, and it's like, well, I mean, and your truth sensors don't detect it because you're like, well, like, yeah, that is true, but like the whole framing of what they're trying to do is try to cast Tom Brady in this particular way, and and this is just the way that the corporate media operates these days, is all about kind of slipping in statements which are, like you're saying, demonstrably true, but give you give you the impression of what they're, this alternative way of viewing things, that's framed the way that they want you to think about, which is frequently like wrong or just like terrible or misleading. But it's really sneaky, and it's really hard to catch it if you aren't deeply, if you aren't intimately aware of what's going on. Because it's like, again, like suppose you had no idea who Tom Brady was, and this is the only article that you're reading. You're like, oh, he lost like 2 Super Bowls to the
What a
Giants.
loser.
Of like, yeah, like, and the idea that you come away with is, yeah, he's like not a good football player, which is like
What a
exactly
tragedy.
the opposite of truth.
Yeah, he's been playing for 22 years, and his notable accomplishment is 2 losses, and that's a bummer. So close, I guess not.
And,
Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, kind of our unfamiliarity with like football and sports in general, and like how it's like you read this and it's like, oh, okay, well, he lost 2 Super Bowls. Like I think majority of people are pretty unfamiliar with politics or like the way things work or any of that stuff. And so that's, I think it was on Joe Rogan's show. He had this, he had some psychologist, doctor guy that was running studies on like, hey, if I change headlines that you see in the thumbnails, or if I change search engine ordering results, he figured out that he could change people's political position almost 75% in terms of how they vote. And so that's like just something to be aware of, right? When you're reading these articles or seeing these things. And I kind of appreciate that this kind of like acknowledgement that it's clickbait headline or whatever has become a sort of a meme throughout the internet, because people now are seeing it more often and more clearly and are able to like dive down into it. But that doesn't change the fact that it like, it totally is it's like all over the place, right? And people are deceived all the time through it because they pick up the one idea that they want you to pick up and not the whole truth. And the one idea that you pick up, like you were saying, is truthful, but it gives you an impression that is not truthful of the entire ordeal.
Right. And it's funny because like, they'll always claim that it's like, well, I'm just giving the full context. People already know maybe about his 7 wins or something like that. We're just trying to give the full picture here. And it's like, there are ways to do that are not in the headline, right? But it makes me think, again, just to go on sort of the examples, but it's like, if we took a biblical example, it's like, King David, who slept with Bathsheba, passes the kingdom to his son Solomon. You lose out on all of the virtue of that, and it's something we've hit on at episodes recently, where it's like you don't want to see, or it's like the culture doesn't want to see great deeds celebrated in many ways. And to me, it's almost like with I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Tom Brady was not super pro-vaccine, maybe. I don't remember if that was actually the case or not, but he did stir the ire of I think sort of the acceptable opinion crowd, and so it's like they and he was already controversial before that, and so it's just like people don't want to celebrate something that is also seen as like, I don't know, maybe like a more masculine trait, virtue kind of thing, where it's like, what is he good at? Well, he's really good at doing physical exertion and, doing incredible feats of strength, which are, traditionally masculine things that we celebrate in the culture. And our culture's dead, set against lauding those types of things nowadays, because you don't want to value things that are notable and worthy and strong, and things that make men in many cases, But yeah, the other thing I'll say is this also makes me think of that one post we had where it was like, man, it's so annoying that we've all these different news sources. I wish we just had the one media source to tell us what the facts. And you're like, I'm really glad we don't have the one media source, because if they're so biased in these small things, like, my hobbies are small things. Hobbies in general, sports, it's, relative, it's a big industry, but in terms of importance, it's a pretty small thing. Compared to, whether or not your country's going to go to war. And so if they can't help but be biased in these stupid small things, how on earth are you supposed to trust corporate media to be unbiased on the things that really matter, where there are real stakes, like, say, weapons of mass destruction or something like that?
And financial interests in it.
Exactly. That's, yeah, totally right.
Speaking of...
I was going to say, speaking of... weapons of mass destruction and financial interest. Our next tweet comes from verified Bill Kristol, who tweets, If tobacco companies were guilty of knowingly promoting falsehoods that led to early deaths, shouldn't Fox be liable for anti-vaccination falsehoods that have led to early deaths? Both did it for profit, and Fox suits and stars know the truth as surely as tobacco execs ever did. Okay. If anyone is unfamiliar with Bill Kristol.
Yeah. Who is Bill Kristol, Donald?
Yeah. Bill Kristol is a term I like to hear, is sort of almost like the representative of Conservatism Inc. This very corporate, acceptable, we want to play nice with the establishment brand of neoconservatism. I believe the whole neoconservative movement, sort of this, allegedly small government, but very hawkish military, which, is kind of a contradiction in terms there, was founded by his father, William Kristol, if I'm not mistaken there. He was one of the lead person who sort of started this movement, and that's where you had, like people like Pat Buchanan, who were cold warriors, but at the end of the day wanted to go back to having a non-interventionist foreign policy. They were like, look, we need to win in Vietnam, but once we're done there, and, we need to sort of like rebut communism, but then we need to withdraw. And so then there was that sort of split between the Buchanan wing and then the sort of the Kristol wing. And Bill Kristol was one of this man here was one of the leading advocates, saying that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and that we absolutely needed to champion every single foreign intervention in the Middle East, all of which have been seen as complete scams, complete lies, and complete dishonesty. So here's this guy who literally knowingly lied us into a war for no benefit other than a government and private arms manufacturing deal and oil companies dealing with the government for this. Here's him saying, yeah, Fox News needs to be held accountable for lying about vaccine stuff because of the deaths that it caused. The deaths that, anti-vax information has caused compared to what you have done, that is what we call no self-awareness.
Yeah, it's like, man, men who live in glass houses shouldn't throw bricks and
or send drones.
or send drones.
Yeah.
I mean, this one is almost too low hanging fruit. You don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, it's like through our Twitter account, I replied to it. It's like Bill, like, nah, but also, if you really do believe this, like, what's your share of the $6 trillion and millions of lives that were lost, from the wars that you lied us into? I think it's just, it's like, it's quite something, to hear these guys talk about, like, that they knew, Colin Powell being like, yeah, I kind of knew, when I went before the world and said that they have, WMDs, that it probably wasn't the case. It's like, so we're supposed to trust you ever after that? Like, no way, man. Like, no way are we going to do that. And I think I brought this example up before. And we shouldn't
immediately prosecute you for war crimes?
Yes, exactly. And
this sounds like a confession. Like,
no, it makes him noble, though.
Because if we don't fight him over there, we'll fight him here. But I remember my dad, back when Nixon was president, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, like, I remember when the audio recordings got leaked and Kissinger was saying, like, hey, we should keep the Vietnam War going because, it's better for our election season, then we can end it after. And that woke him up, right? To the like, oh, there is a military-industrial complex. There is political motivation for having wars happen. And it's just crazy to me. It's like, okay, because you earned the title of president through a popularity contest, like, you get to go, with impunity, kill people and order the deaths of people. And then, your Secretary of State, if they're on TV and asked, like, why did you starve 500,000 children to death? You have the gall to say, oh, well, I think it was worth it, to starve them to death. And then in the countries that you have, killed and pillaged and starved their children to death, when they retaliate, like, it's like, oh my gosh, like, how did this ever happen? Like, we haven't been over there enough. We need to be over there more, causing more damage and causing more people to do evil things, And obviously, like, the 9/11 and all that stuff, like, awful. Like, we don't condone any sort of loss of life or violence or anything like that. But you also have to realize, it's like Ron Paul's right. Like, the blowback theory is true, right? Like, imagine if someone came over here and set up military bases all around the USA and starved a bunch of our children. Do you think the people I even think a bunch of the pansies here in Seattle would probably want to go do something crazy to that country that was doing that to us. And I obviously we got to shout out the great Scott Horton debating Bill Kristol a couple months ago. Just totally eviscerated him, right? Even got him to admit that it's probably not good to go fight wars in countries where you have no interest in.
Wait, he did defend one conflict, which was
the Baltic. Yeah,
the Balkans. Yeah. What a notable conflict that was, the Balkans. I mean... But another thing I want to...
Okay, man. Like, I wonder what percentage... that was nuts when he did that. He's like, hey, can you point to one that was successful, in the past 80 years? He's like, I think the Balkans. It's like, okay, I wonder what percentage of blood and treasure the Balkans occupy of our spending, in the past.
I know.
Oh, that was a hell of a thing to say.
The other thing, moving on from Bill Kristol himself, the content of this tweet, even if it wasn't Bill Kristol, would also be really bad and cringy too. Because this, to me, is such a virtue signal where it's like, has there been anti-vax misinformation pushed out by Fox News? I actually don't know about Fox News. Probably. There's been a lot of, anti-vax misinformation on the internet in general. But there's also been a heck ton of vaccine misinformation that's not only been pushed out by MSNBC, CNBC, CNN, but also the United States government. And it's like, for as much, alleged deaths that you would say that anti-vax propaganda has called, how on earth are you going to, call them out when we've had not only, potential life-threatening, conditions put on people because of the denial of things like increased risk of the heart
myocarditis.
risk myocarditis for young men or children, boys. But also just in general, all of the lives that have been ruined and the destruction caused by lockdowns, by these policies that they put into place and then later went back on. Things that they've said, this is what you have to do, this works, and then later had to go back and retract because, the virus is adapting or none of the policies actually worked, right? So all of this damage and destruction happened not only from, an optional news network that you can watch, but from all of the corporate mainstream media and the official government that is the only authority to enforce that kind of thing. So, yeah, it is technically possible that there were maybe some unfortunate deaths from anti-vax misinformation from Fox News. That is definitely a possibility. But why on earth would you focus on that when that is a fraction of what the official government narrative has caused in terms of damage and destruction and just overall misery?
I just think it's like, now do Fauci, Kristol, like,
right.
Like they made this big thing, like wear a mask, save a life. And it's like, okay, well, in the beginning of this, Fauci told us that he lied to us that masks don't work, regardless of whether you think they do or don't. He thought they did and he lied. So if masks work and they save lives and you lied to tell people to not buy or wear masks, like, I guess what percentage of people dying does Fauci own, and what share should he cover? It's just, these people are, it's so cringe because it's so clear. They have an agenda that is self-serving, and they're going to lie to you to get it done. And, Bill Kristol is tale as old as time for that, I guess.
Okay. Unless anyone has any last thoughts, I think I'll let Bill Kristol rest a little bit. He doesn't get much of that.
We're going to do our video.
Yeah. We've got a video for this next one. And... ooh, let me tell you, this is another one of those takes where everyone looks bad. So please enjoy.
Let's see if it plays.
Government is what takes all of your money and gives you very little. Okay, that's kind. I mean, it's kind. Okay, that's kind. Depends on the kind of government. Depends on the kind of. Yeah, that is what taxes are for. Yeah, that is what taxes are for. But taxes are the government takes taxes are the government money that you spend, or the money that you earn, or the money that property value of your house. Property value of your house. Mostly yes. I mean, they're supposed to spend it on things like they're supposed to spend it. They're not supposed to spend it on just random projects, random silly things that they have in their head, or silly things that they have in their head, and they tend to spend it. But as you get older, you will realize how little you like taxes. I come from a state called California, where monsters roam the streets, where monsters and garbage is strewn everywhere. And garbage is strewn everywhere. Kind of makes up the Biden as he goes. Kind of makes up. I don't think, unfortunately, he cares very much. I don't think, unfortunately, he cares very much about his rules for being president. I think he just Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia is preventing Joe Biden from doing a lot of bad things. Joe Biden. So guys, you just learn more than you will. So guys, you just learn more than you will in all of college about how the government works.
So I feel like this one, there's actually a whole lot of things to go into in that video alone. But before we do that, we're going to show the corresponding cringe post with it, which comes from another terrible internet personality who I don't think we featured on this show before, but I will not be surprised if he comes again because he's just the worst. He's not verified, but I am going to out him because he is a known internet person. And you know what? Outing this guy is not the worst thing in the world. So Vaush tweets, literally immediately losing to a child, and then follows with another tweet. It's not even a joke. He instantly conceded the position. He's pushing propaganda to kids and actually had to back off. Okay. All right. It's when there's so much cringe and everyone is cringy, it's so hard to know how to start. But I'm gonna start with I'm gonna go into some details later. But first, that video is just obviously staged. It's obviously scripted. Why does Vaush think that, the pushback from the scripted kids and Ben Shapiro not steamrolling literal 8-year-olds means that he's conceding a debate? It's like if I, was walking on the street and, I said, hey, it's a good morning to you, to like this, person, and they said like, it's not a good morning, I broke my arm, and then I'd like keep walking because they're like making a rude gesture at me or something, and then something like, wow, he conceded the argument right away, he doesn't even think it's a good day, literally had to back. I was like, obviously that's not something worth engaging, and obviously that's not like what do you mean that he's pushing propaganda to kids and had to back off? It's like, this is a whole scripted thing. I don't know. Okay, it's just baffling that you could be so stupid in response to something that was already pretty stupid.
Do you want to go, or do you want me to go, Jonathan?
You go first.
Okay, cool. I agree. It's obviously edited too, like crazy cuts. It's like you could literally cut him saying, "Well, maybe you're right." Like he probably could have said that anywhere else, and then they cut it to where it was supposed to be. But so obviously that's really cringe. But I want to actually hit at Ben Shapiro because, like, he let's just even take it for what it is. Like he says, well, taxation is theft. Like he starts out the video saying that, and then he's like, well, taxes are supposed to be spent on things like police. It's like, that's the whole problem with these conservatives, right? Is that like they don't actually have a unified position like that's based on principle, right? Because if taxation is theft, it doesn't matter if it's spent on good things that you think are good. It doesn't matter if it's spent on police or whatever. And in that sense, even a child could defeat the argument, right? Because it's not a unified principle that is actually, all encompassing and makes sense that you can live by. And so, like, that's how, if I was like, one of these college students, a bunch of years ago that Ben Shapiro, was going to go against, that's how I would push it. It's like, he doesn't actually have a consistent life principle through his life or political philosophy that he can live by. And that's why these guys get kind of, they rightfully so can get destroyed, right? When they encounter someone that does have or will push them on those type of political philosophies. And so obviously, I like more Ben Shapiro than I dislike, but like this aspect of him, it's a bummer, man. I've been waiting for the rule of like the difference between a minarchist and an anarchist is 6 months. I've been waiting for that to happen to him for like 6 years now. It's like, come on, you're so close. You're so close.
One thing that Ben said that made me laugh was, I think that Joe Biden doesn't play by the rules, unfortunately, and he should play by. I'm like, what president has ever played by the rules in your lifetime, dude?
What rules?
Yeah, yeah, I know. Well, that's the other thing, right? Is it's like, okay, let's say that every executive has not gone to any sort of executive overreach. The rules also are terrible because they let you do things like invade foreign countries. You just write the rules to how you want. We declared a war on terror with George W. Bush, and you were in favor of that, Ben. That's rewriting the rules because you didn't want to abide by the current rules, So his whole, like that's a good critique on Biden. Like, the problem with Biden is he doesn't play by the rules of the presidency. You're like, okay, that's his problem, right? It's not anything in the quality of what he's doing. If Biden was doing his exact agenda, but he was just doing it through legislative means, well, I mean, then it's okay that he's, causing mass inflation and he's, causing these lockdowns and trying to put, vaccine mandates on people. That's totally fine if it's voted on by, a small group of people called senators. Then it's okay. But he's not doing that by the rules. So then I have a problem with what he's doing. Like, what a weak argument, too.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about it before the show. It's just like, the little moment where the kid is like, he's just way off base. It's like, okay, one, I'm pretty sure the producer of the video was like, could you say something like this? And then they say it. And then they're like, give him a clap. Like, good job, kid. But two, it's like, okay, even if the kid actually thought that, it's like, why do I care what an 8-year-old kid thinks, about an argument, especially when they don't have any arguments to back it up, right? And that's, I think that really speaks to, like, there's this weird cultural phenomenon, I think, right now where, like, where this, like, it's almost like the children or the people that are least qualified because they are, like, you wouldn't expect it, are supposed to have the biggest voice, in any sort of, like, debate or argument or anything like that. And so that, and it's just like the fact that the producers felt like they needed to put that in there because they thought it would be somewhat persuadable just really speaks to that. And it's unfortunate. And I hope that we can kind of get back towards, like, actually arguing about the substantive things and, pushing back on the actual philosophy as opposed to, like, oh, well, because this person's an 8-year-old kid, like, wow, what a profound thing for an 8. It's kind of like those fake posts, right? On Twitter where, like, a parent will say, my kid, laid out the entire intricacies of CRT and, all that. It's like, no, they didn't. That's that's bullcrap that your kid said that. You're just making it up because it makes you feel good to say that. And it seems unexpected.
Well, I was going to say, I think Jonathan's child actually came up to him the other day and said, why do Republicans want to erase racism from the history textbooks? Isn't that true, Jonathan?
That's true. That's true. My 2-year-old son came to me. It's the first full sentence that he's actually said.
Wow, it's so beautiful.
And he read the Pulitzer Prize winning Mouse, novel Mouse right after.
Yes, that's true. We thought it was age appropriate for him. I think the thing that just, like, sticks out to me is, this, like, Shapiro's, like, pushing propaganda, to these kids. And it's just like, well, I mean, like, maybe sort of, like, I mean, I think it's more that he's just sort of pushing an ideology, but he's, like, also just doing it badly. Yeah. And I mean, and the fact that the kids are giving pushback, it's like, again, like, whether it's scripted or not, like, the purpose is the pushback that Shapiro is receiving in this is like, no, dude, but that's the propaganda about, like, the great government that, like, uses your taxpayer dollars to, like, do all of these great things. And it's like, no, like, that's the propaganda that's being pumped into kids' heads, not like taxation is theft or something.
That's the classic public school line, right? Taxation is theft. That's what they're getting taught every day, from 9 to 5 or 3
exactly.
or whatever.
And it's like, this just, like, sticks out to this, like, just it reeks to me of this guy of someone who, like, doesn't have children and, like, has to actually spend time around children, because it's like, how do you think raising children works? It's like, I mean, you're not, like, teaching them in, like, let's think through all of the, like, reasoned arguments and let me, like, justify all of this for. It's like, no, for, like, years and years, it's just like you just tell your kid how it is. And so it's like, in a sense, like, all parenting is like indoctrinating children. Like that's what it is. That's what education is for years and years and years. They're just
gonna
like
clip
raw
that, man.
indoctrination.
They're going to clip that. Jonathan from the John 3:15 podcast says you should indoctrinate children.
Yes, you should, because if you're not indoctrinating your children, somebody else is.
Yes. I was talking with my parents about this, because we were talking about the the transgender swimmer over in Pennsylvania, and I was telling them, like, yeah, Mom, Dad, like, I'm not going to public school my kids, like here in Seattle, at least, you go in and you have teachers that are literally telling them, like, hey, you can be, if you feel like you're a girl, like, you should be a girl, if you're a guy or anything like that. And I was like, Mom, Dad, like, you remember, like, when I was, like, 4 years old, like, I thought I was a T-Rex and I would try and bite people because I thought I was a T-Rex. And, like, thank God you told me that I'm not a T-Rex and I'm not allowed to bite people or else I'm going to get spanked, and they hardly ever spanked me, but you know what I'm saying. And it's like, could you imagine, like, the logical line? Like, I don't have kids yet, Jonathan, but, like, I think about it a lot because I want to have kids at some point. And it's like, okay, like, the logical conclusion of these people's like life, like of how they view the world, is like, my parents should have said, yeah, if you want to be a T-Rex, you can be a T-Rex, you know? And it's like, I wouldn't be on this podcast. I'd be out trying to like eat people or something. I don't know. And I think this kind of brings me to the other point about like the public school propaganda, right? Which is like, it's like, what sounds more propaganda? You know, someone sitting down trying to tell kids like, and lay out an argument for like why taxation is theft, like although he did it poorly, or showing up to a building for 8 hours a day where teachers don't want their parents to see, you know, these kids, what they're being taught. And oh, by the way, they've got to turn to a flag, hold a hand over their heart, pledge allegiance to it, and then worship the great leaders on the wall that are also called presidents. It's like, you know, that sounds a little bit more creepy and a little bit more propaganda than, you know, the former.
Yeah, it's like I think it's Tom Woods who, you know, says it's like,
yes,
it's so weird that we put like, you know, presidents' faces on the wall. It's like, you know, in any other situation, you know, it's creepy of like, if it was a Walmart school and we just like had all of the past CEOs of Walmart that we were like pledging allegiance to, you'd know that was creepy.
We think it's weird when we see it in North Korea, right? It's like, oh, like the Kims are on the wall everywhere. And it's like, well, yeah, there's only 3 of them, but we've got, you know, 40 plus of ours. So, you know, that's...
Yeah, it's just that most of ours died long enough ago that it's, you know, they're just kind of artifacts of history. So
creepiness
okay now.
has an expiry date, so you're good, you know. It's funny because when you're, you know, what you're bringing up with like sort of the idea of indoctrination and propaganda and all that kind of stuff, it's like, okay, so based on this person who thinks that any kind of, you know, bringing forth ideas to kids is propaganda or is, you know, if it's idea I don't like, then it counts as propaganda. But it's like, even in this scenario where the kids are obviously being fed lines, the alleged propaganda here from Ben Shapiro is getting pushback. You don't get to push back on propaganda. Like, that's kind of one of the things about propaganda is that it goes non-challenged. It's everywhere, it's plastered. And so it's like, you know, another way to think about it is, what is the propaganda? This guy coming in, making a bad reasoned argument, like Britt said, or literally being fed lines from producers holding cameras telling you what to say. That is way more propaganda-y. And the thing that I will say too is that it's like, one thing that I've helped out in my church's Sunday school in the younger, like 7 through 11 and the younger classes before, but through the 7 through 11, when kids are starting to sort of, you know, develop a little bit more of a sort of thinking about things in their faith and stuff like that, right? Like, it's not just the repetition of the truths. At some point, it's when they kind of start asking questions. One thing that what we've done at my church that I really appreciate is, like, after every lesson, after you sort of read through this book, talk through the scriptures, talk about ideas and all that and what it means, we've literally given them time to wonder, right? Time to say, let's ask what questions do you have? And even if you don't have the answer right there, you encourage it, right? You're like, oh, that's a really good question. Let's think about that. And that kind of thing is so much more prevalent in most religious contexts and most sort of contexts where you are in the minority because you are going to be challenged on it than it is in a context like in the modern day universities, where if you don't hold the same opinion, you're just called a racist, you're called a sexist, you're called a bigot, you're called a horrible person. And so there's no moments for that wondering. And so the use of this term propaganda is so funny to me, because it's like, culturally speaking, taxation is theft is the minority position. It's not the propaganda. And people like Vaush are the ones who are in this ideology where you're literally not allowed to challenge it, or else you get screamed down and taken off YouTube or something like that. You know, it's kind of wild. Okay, I feel like I had one more cringe from Ben Shapiro, just because his whole thing was pretty cringy, but I think I'd slipped my mind. So I think unless you guys have anything else, I think we can wrap up this episode. Yeah, okay. I can't think of it. That's frustrating. I do like a chance to dunk on Ben Shapiro, you know, destroy him with his own facts and logic, but we'll have to save that for another day. So thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Cringe Post podcast. Once again, I'm going to give Jonathan a chance to shout out his show. Thanks for being here with us. Really appreciate it. Love having you on and love your show and what you're up to. So once again, make that pitch.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for having me on the episode here. This was a blast getting to do this with you guys and cringe together. But yeah, so if you guys are interested, all of you listeners out there, in knowing a little bit more about the Bible or various Bible verses, and maybe some of the popular ones where people might go astray in their interpretation, well, we got the podcast. That's the John 3:15 podcast, not John 3:16, John 3:15. And you can find us. We're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on all the major podcasting platforms. And yeah, so if you come by and take a listen, as Donald was saying, the last couple episodes that we've been doing, we're in a series on politics and theology. So we just did one on taxation. The one before that, we actually tackled Romans 13. So if any of y'all out there have been kind of in the I guess the evangelical subculture that's been, devouring itself over Romans 13, we give you the definitive take on what Romans 13 is actually saying. So anyway, with those kind of teasers, if you like politics, we got a lot of content recently about what the Bible has to say about politics. And yeah, and then the next episode will be dropping soon here as well. So come check us out.
I hear that there was even an episode that had one guest on it, and you would not believe how that episode went if I told you. So
it's true. You won't believe who our last guest was. Yeah.
You will be amazed at it. Just a little Habakkuk drop there. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you guys again. Make sure to like and comment and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. All that good lingo you hear at the end of your YouTube videos. We appreciate it. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the next one.